I guess this is the first meeting we've all had since the public input session. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to gather your impressions from the public input.
I think it's very clear that our folks want a mixture. They want different sizes, not too many small ones. I've heard that clearly.
Yeah.
And just a mixture.
Anybody else?
I think that's the compromise that we'll start with.
Yeah,
Some of
they
them
want
want,
bigger.
some of them want larger lots, some of them want, there's a couple that want it smaller, that agree with it, but I think the compromise would be a mixture.
I didn't get the fellow's name, or if I did, I forgot the fellow at the very end, right before we had to wrap it up. I think that was his statement, is, to try to have a mix and to not really go with a certain size. Your impressions?
Yeah, my impressions is that they want to compromise. Let me go on the record as saying that compromise is death to Salado from a tax point of view. And compromises are death to Salado from a tax point of view. Death, D-E-A-T-H.
Okay, okay.
And the reason is simple, that if we compromise, we will discourage developers from joining the village. And if we discourage people from joining the village, we will lose significant, and I mean huge, amounts of tax revenue over the years. And secondly, we will not be able to keep our infrastructure, our city services, and everything else up. And I would rather see a healthy, prosperous Salado, and I just want you to put this on the record.
I'm trying to capture the
Well, that's right. There's our friend over there.
Here.
So my point is that as we look at the future of Salado, we must have effective growth to use and I would rather see to get the tax revenue. And in order, because they're going to be out there anyway. If we say, okay, let's have a compromise where 50% of the lots have to be greater than half an acre, the developers aren't going to develop that land out there and get in our sewer system and join our village. It doesn't make any sense for them to do it because they're not going to make any money. The only way they're going to make any money is with smaller lot sizes. Now, from a personal point of view, and again, this is not aimed at anybody, I just want to get it in the record. From a personal point of view, I'd rather see houses out there than cow fields, right? Cow pastures. Because those houses, those cows don't give us any revenue, but houses do. Furthermore, there are things we can do to prevent the situation that I pointed out to you on Otoge Lowry there, changing the setbacks, minimum house sizes, minimum backyards, et cetera, And also, the other thing that I think of is no street-facing garages, because to me, that is the look of Salado as I drive around. Very few houses have front-facing garages. So if we change the setbacks, or at least set the setbacks, so that it is very difficult for people to put up row houses, if you want to call them that. And I don't want that, but I think we can develop a plan that will allow houses with significant curb appeal, to be built on smaller lots without disturbing Salado. My understanding is, I have a reliable source that tells me that the houses over in the sanctuary are going to be $350,000 or $400,000 houses on those small lots. And that is a significant, I don't know what we can't do anything about the setbacks over there, we can't be doing anything about that yet. But I understand there's a number of plats that are coming in. And if we can get changes to the setbacks and the code. And there were three things I wanted to say: setbacks, elevations. Right. I'm sorry. Talk to my wife about this. So I think we should go with smaller lots and recommend to the Board of Aldermen and the P&Z that we change setbacks. We require elevations to be given to us, so we know what and I realize, Don, I don't believe we can enforce elevations too much or materials, but we can suggest to the builder that elevations would be nice. And I'm sure they would give them to us if we asked for them. And side loading garages. Now, I don't know whether we can enforce side loading garages, but I think that's really important because that prevents a row of houses in front of garages from being built, and also requires slightly more space, I'm guessing. Maybe slightly larger house.
The four things you mentioned: the smaller lots require submission of elevations for review and approval by the
At least
commission.
respect. Yeah.
Control setbacks and side loading garages. Of those four things, three of them are P&Z items.
Right. I know, that's what I'm saying, we need to make a recommendation.
Okay, I think we need to distinguish between what this committee's trying to do and then distinguish these other items as recommendations for P&Z to.
And I meant to
consider.
make that clear that I'm saying we should recommend. So the question becomes, what minimum lot size would be the balance between encouraging developers to join our village and hook up to our sewer system and too small? Okay, this I don't know. The compromise situation is just that. I don't know if all of you went through this management exercise, what is a trip to Abilene, where everybody doesn't want to go to Abilene, but ends up in Abilene anyway, because they can't make a decision. So they say, well, I thought you meant this, and I thought you meant this, so they all went to Abilene, which is a place they didn't want to go.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
And I'm trying to cut to the chase, as we've got,
Okay. I'm not.
we've got ground to cover, but you said compromise, you expressed compromise is bad.
A compromise that
Bad
requires, yeah, because any compromise, Frank's compromise or compromise I heard from one of the aldermen, and they would all push the average lot size up to 0.4 acres or 0.37 acres. I've done a little math on it, and that's too big. The developers aren't going to do that because they don't make any money by the time they hook up to the sewer and have to deal with all of our regulations. You're not going to do it. So what we need is a compromise that is sufficiently effective from a developer's point of view, and at the same time make recommendations and such that will prevent the dissatisfying. I'm sorry.
No, I understand. I'm trying to know what you're saying. So let me ask you a question. If we as a committee, if we define compromise as a mix of different size lots in a development, which is pretty much, as we polled around, is pretty much what everybody's big main takeaway was from the public input session. And if we as a committee make a recommendation that a certain percentage of developments, a certain percentage of lots in a development should be larger than this size, and another subset should be larger than another size, and we break it down into different ranges, and we say, okay, if you're bringing in a development and you want to come into the village and your development has 100 lots, then we make up a number right now, but 20% of them must be half an acre or larger. 30% of it must be 1/4 of an acre or larger.
It's too big.
What I'm driving at is not the numbers I'm just throwing out there. What I'm driving at is the structure that we make as a recommendation, where we have a bracketed range of different lot sizes in a development. We as a committee say, this should be the minimum standard for a development committee. To me, that is a compromise. It gives a range of lot sizes that would be small for corner conditions and weird topographical situations and for smaller size houses. And it will also give a range of larger lots for different applications. Well, what I'm asking you is if we as a committee agree on a set of bracketed ranges, do you still believe that that is a compromise that would be bad for Salado?
No, but the average lot size has to be small enough to attract developers to look up to our city system, what we're going to say.
When we started out though, every one of us said we want to maintain the integrity of Salado. That was across the board. You were started with that. You want to maintain the integrity of Salado. And if you bump in a bunch of small lotted areas, that's not the integrity of Salado.
Yes, I understand the argument, and I don't want to. I just simply disagree with it.
And also you use the sanctuary as your numbers crunching. I don't know of anybody that's happy with happening in sanctuary, except for the developer, maybe the house,
and
maybe the mayor.
And that development is going to bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax revenue.
I get that. I get that. But I don't know if that's what Salado wants. The people of Salado.
It's that or the city goes down the tube.
The city's been here for hundreds of years.
The situation is changing. For hundreds of years, there's been cow pastures surrounding us.
I like that.
I know, but in 5 years, no matter what we do here, we're going to have 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 houses surrounding us. We're going to be driving on our streets, using our fire and police services, working with our city administrator or whatever, and it's not going to be the same. And when it's not the same and our streets are falling apart and everything else, you are not going to be able to maintain the Salado that you want. Whereas if we deal with this effectively now, we'll get those people in the village, we'll have the money to provide the city services. And my guess, and having seen this happen, right, my guess is that 10 years from now, people will be saying, thank God we got all those people in the village because they can pay for it. And I don't disagree with you, I'm not trying to be argumentative. All I'm saying is that if the average lot size, and I'm just going to throw out a number here to stay the same, were 0.15 acre, which is roughly 7,000 square feet, if I'm right, that would be sufficient, plus elevations, setbacks, and no front load garages. We would maintain the village look, but we would also get this money from them.
Hold on. Let me step in. I want to pull everybody back away from the number details of this. Like we're not at the point right now where we're discussing sizes in numbers. What I want to establish, first of all, is the structure of our recommendation. And that is, can we all agree that our recommendation needs to be a blend of bracketed lot sizes in developments of different sizes? We can let that structure flesh itself out in our discussions.
But that was my communication. I gave some suggestions and I was very clear. I'm good with whatever changes we make to it. It's got to be a mix.
Okay, so we're all in agreement that it needs to be a mix. The recommendations need to be a mix, unless we're, reach some minimum threshold of 3 lots or 4 lots or something.
Jay, let me ask you this question. What happens in the case if you have a developer that wants to come in and build an estate subdivision and not go with the bracket approach, and he's willing to come in and put in, say, I'm not getting the number, but 2 to 5 acre lot minimums, and those type of situations, Are you gonna force, you force that guy to go, whoa?
I think.
No, but I think we can make,
We're doing minimums.
we can make our recommendations with our brackets loaded from the top side
There you go.
so that somebody, if somebody wants to build in the state subdivision now, which is gonna have a pretty high tax base.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if they will, it's
So-
up to us.
So if somebody does that, we can top load those brackets so that as they come into the formula for fulfilling the requirements, if they fulfill the requirements on the large side.
Got
And then they, it's sort of, think of it as a track filter, as they descend through the lot sizes, they get different requirements at each level.
it. I just want to make sure we don't choke those guys out, because there are going to be some of those guys.
Okay, so we're all in agreement then. I just want to make sure I'm reiterating this, we get nods all the way around the table for that. Our recommendations should be a bracketed set of lot sizes that are mixed from a small to a large, or from a large to a small. Okay. Okay. What? Tell me your thoughts.
I'm not there by us defining a formula for 10-acre subdivision. Subdivision is more than one lot. It could be two, it could be 2,000. Is that correct?
Right.
When you get into small subdivisions, it's nice in theory to have this bracketed 20%, 40%, 20%. From a development standpoint, I stretching, I've developed all over the state or the world, but I've never had to face that before from the development side. And I think it takes away from the planning of a subdivision to sit there and say, this, you gotta have this many half acre, you gotta have this many small, you have to have this. The way I see it is you leave that flexibility, you put a number out there that the average has to be, and you let the developer say, it's no specific formula, but if you have a subdivision, this is the minimum lot size within it for all of it. If you want to have big and you want to have small, and you can niche that inside the property limits that you have, and have a little village of patio homes and another village of medium-sized homes, and another village of half-acre estate homes, that's fine. But if that's what they want to do, but to place the control at the city level as to you got to have this set number, I don't think it's going to work very well.
Okay.
So that would be your average lot size.
That's a very good question. I'd like us to have some discussion on that. I understand in theory that is a nice way to look at it and a good way to look at it. But when you're the developer, depending upon the piece of land you're working with, depending upon the price, depending upon location, it's hard to get that formula to work in every place you go. But if you leave that flexibility, you say, here's the minimum you got to meet for this subdivision, whether it's 5 lots or whether it's 5,500 lots. You got to meet this minimum on each one of these plats coming through. Okay, so he can adjust down the road if he wants, but this is typically more along the lines of larger subdivisions. I'm saying, and that's mostly my background. I don't really see that except where Don's talking about here, where the cow pastures are to the west of town, far east of town. And I think that's absolutely true out there. But I don't know that I agree with that in town and inside the ETJ, inside the city limits as to what we do on that. I kind of wanted to beat that around too. But,
the benefit of what you're talking about, Jim, is that helps also account for topographic issues that may prevent you from meeting the bracketed approach.
I was going there too. Thank you for saying it. But I mean, you do have, sometimes you have topo concerns that just don't work from single family.
Right.
like Don's concept of, side-loaded garages, but if you go to small lots, that becomes more problematic for builders and developers. If you go to alleys have their problems too. They're nice, but you go to alleys historically have lots of trouble with them.
My objective with the side-load garages
Yeah.
was to put the developers in a position where they can't compress the houses and things like that, to make it so that the developers can't put little cookie cutter houses on little lots. And because remember, every house that we're looking at out here is gonna be $350,000. It isn't gonna be $250,000 houses they're building out there.
Where, in cow pastures?
Anywhere.
No,
Look at the prices.
I think it's gonna be less than that when you get the cheaper land.
Three Creeks.
Go look. I just really
Three
believe,
Creeks houses.
I think closer to town is more likely than further away. So I'm not disagreeing with the concept, except I'm placing that control more in line with let them decide how they choose to split lots of the subdivision. And we hold them to one standard for each subdivision plat that comes in and say, you gotta have, just say 1/3 acre lots. I don't care if you have some that are less than that, but you're gonna have to make it up on the whole, because your next plat's not gonna be approved if you haven't done that. And so you've got to maintain that in that subdivision. And if you don't, then, well, you'll see it on the lot sizes that come in there.
So to restate what you're saying, the average or median lot size would be the controlling factor. And the mix would come from the sheer topography and layout of each individual development.
Yes, I mean, I'm after a minimum lot size in this area. That's what I'm after. How that developer wants to set up his subdivision in a traditional matrix with rectangular streets and all that, that's the most efficient, most cost effective, and it's by far the ugliest way to do a subdivision. The best way to do it is with curvilinear streets, cul-de-sacs, and things like that. When you do that, you have to, because of your streets, you've got to spread out your lots just because of that. Because when you're moving and doing cul-de-sacs, you don't have that cookie cutter thing all the way down the street. It's moving. And the cul-de-sac lots are more pie-shaped around there. So, and believe it or not, most developers really like that because the street look is a lot better and it's more private and it slows down traffic and it doesn't look like a bowling alley. And most of the time when you see that is when you see that in very lower end housing today, where they're really trying to jam it out. Exactly. Gerald right over here. They don't want to build the beautiful streets to turn in and out and have it with your regular shaped, pie shaped lot so that you can go in there and tuck the side loaded garage with the rest. Elevation, my experience tells me on that it's maybe good to try to limit their elevations to no more than, they've got to have, it really depends on lots of production homes. Some builders will have maybe 5 or 6 or 7 elevations in a particular.
I'm just suggesting that we request elevations rather than that we make them conform.
Well, you won't, in ETJ, you're not gonna make them conform,
Right.
you have no zoning control.
We have no, as Don tells me, you can't do it.
Right out there in the city.
But what's going to be built? What's going to be built in the city?
I don't know.
Nothing.
No, there's still buildable lots.
The lots are there.
But
I
what
mean,
we're
I
trying
don't
to
see
do,
anybody subdividing Salado
That
in the
makes
village.
sense what I'm
but that's
saying.
what we're trying to
Rather
do.
Well, that's in essence what we're trying to do. It's a different way to look at it. It does provide,
It will
it provides more freedom for developer, but it still makes sure you maintain a mix.
That's right.
With the
In
absolute,
the village now,
we probably need to have an absolute minimum.
Absolutely.
And whatever that is, 4,000 square feet or whatever that magic number is, that'd be a tenth of an acre. I would think that's probably the absolute.
But you had like, if I remember here, I don't want to give Jay, I don't want to let Jay run this meeting. but-
No.
So that's why I'm kind of maybe cutting the pie at a different look, but I think the end result is gonna be pretty consistent with what you're talking about.
I'd just like to have a minimum lot size requirement average, okay? In other words, something like,
That's what I'm after.
and that's what you're after.
Yes.
And that's what I'm after.
But he's after sounded larger than what you'd recommend,
Right, and I'm going
which
to
is where I am.
go on record to say, I believe 0.15 acres is about right. But I realize that will be a very unpopular decision with those that are vocal about this situation.
To get to an average of 0.15 is not practical,
That's 6,500 square feet for your average.
which means you're gonna have to have a significant percentage below that
Yeah.
to get to the average.
Or most of them are that size.
Most are gonna be little bitty lots.
Now, let me ask this
We
question.
can argue about that.
Oh, they would be.
Let me ask you a question about the metric of how we're measuring lot sizes. I think, from my past, like a developer, if I have 100 acres and I put 300 lots on it, whether, on usable land, not greenbelt land, I have 100 acres of good land to develop on, maybe 10 or 20 acres of greenbelt. That's a different story, and we'll talk about parkland and all the rest there, but in the 100 acres, I said to them, how many lots do I have? What's the minimum that I have to have in there to satisfy the balance of the whole subdivision plan? 300. So I look at it, and maybe that's just a matter of semantics, but I say that's 3 lots per acre. That's not the same as 14,000 square feet. I want to make sure we got apples to apples, because 3 lots per acre on the lot size alone would be 14,000, give or take, square foot lots. But when you put the streets and the right of way and the rest in it, you gotta put those in there too, so do we think alike on
Yes,
that?
we do.
So when I'm saying X lots per acre, I'm basically, it's streets and everything included. So if I have a 10-acre development and I have 20 lots in it, that's a half acre lot subdivision, one acre.
But you're not gonna be able to put, I agree with you. You have
But you won't be able to put what?
streets, well, if you say you got 10 acres and you're gonna put 20 lots, you're no streets.
Without sewer, yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
So, you gotta have streets. The way I figured it was, I was increasing the size of the subdivision, just like we talked about here, I think, where 4 lots to the acre equates to 0.2 acres per lot, giving 0.2 acres to streets and other things. So, yeah,
I just want to make sure we're talking apples to apples, we're talking
I
about
agree
the
with
size
you.
of lot. And not to say that I'm right at all, in my mind, it's just stuck. If I've got 100 acres and I put 400 lots on it, then I've got quarter-acre lots.
you don't, you have 0.2.
I have quarter-acre lots on a gross acre basis of the subdivision, not of the lot. And the subdivision is how the plans are done.
The other thing you gotta think about is this, and that is the fact that you're talking about wastewater available subdivision.
Well, that's right, that's
So-
assumed.
Yeah, and the other thing to think about along these lines is the fact, the way the wastewater system is set up right now and is growing right now, from a development standpoint, most of those developments that are coming onto that system are gonna be at the table looking for some type of development agreement that's gonna involve annexation and those type of things too. So that equation's in there too, so that deals with that negotiation piece potentially, not in all cases, but potentially for those subdivisions. So, there's some variables out there to look at, but I think what you're saying is exactly right. You've got to extract the amenity space, for lack of a better phrase, the infrastructure.
Along those, I'm sorry, along those lines that you were just talking about, let me further throw this into the discussion. No matter how we arrive at a structure for the committee recommendations, and I think we're all trying to get to the same point, whether we do it through a mandated percentage of lot sizes, or whether we do it through an absolute minimum average lot size, both those things are ultimately going to end up with a blend of lot sizes in development.
Absolutely.
So no matter how we arrive at those two situations, one other item that I recall hearing mentioned at this public input was green space. Is there a way that this committee, through our recommendations, can encourage green space development, common area development within a subdivision? And again, I'm asking the question of all of you. I think the sun is ready to the individual parts here. My thought would be to somehow allow a credit of some kind in the calculations for green space that developers set aside as common area. And it has to be usable common area. And again, this committee's task is lot sizes, and this drifts back into planning and zoning.
Yes.
But our recommendations can be a lot size, and they can be contingent upon planning and zoning taking up and making recommendations for these other items. So I don't think our hands are tied by that. With that being said,
Well,
does anyone have any ideas on how we can accommodate green space development and encourage, foster that as something that the village wants to see in its
Jay, we're in the middle of working with P&Z on a rewrite of the parkland dedication ordinance, which I think will deal with some of that open space issues you have. Right now, the parkland dedication ordinance is lopsided. It promotes payment as opposed to dedication. And the concept is to flip that and get it to the point where it's to their benefit to dedicate as opposed to pay. So that will help deal with some of that. But you have absolutely the ability to make that suggestion, especially for the ETJ subdivisions. That's one of those things you can build in, one of those elements you can build into a subdivision ordinance. While you don't have zoning authority, you can build something like that.
if you're doing a small lot subdivision, you just gonna almost have to, a small subdivision of lots. You're not gonna be able to, in most cases, park in that. So
Right.
It's gotta be, I choose a little bit different wording than Don. It needs to be a balance. If you have a small subdivision, you wanna go pay into it. You won't wanna take 5 or 7%, 10% of your land at this way. That gets very expensive. The other thing is, you're correct. There's a big difference between greenbelt and unusable land.
Right.
I mean,
There are a lot of developers that will give you some usable.
they love to give you all the headaches that might exist in an area, and if you're willing to take it, but usable to me can be a very passive park. It could be a dog park. It could be just an open space that's maintained. It doesn't need.
But not a cliff ravine.
Right. I mean,
A drainage pond, anything like that.
so I do agree with that.
Usable green space.
And I think that'd be a great recommendation in there, and I think Frank was, I recall, pretty much on target. Kind of what I thought was a reasonable look at that.
I guess what I get at, it totally dovetails what we're talking about doing in the parkland.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear you're already working on it. We can support I guess you could say we support a green space, a green belt deal of usable acreage for that purpose. And they will argue about what usable means. It could be floodplain. The floodplain is very usable for recreation,
When it's not
but it's
flooded.
not when it's not flooded. And then it is,
Which is rare.
but it happens, but not penalize them on their net developable acreage is, but I definitely think that should be a recommendation.
Can I have one more? we need to set more than one parameter here. If we're going to go to an average lot size, we also need to set an absolute minimum lot size.
Like that's what he's talking about.
You said it.
And also, I would even go with what you said, JD, a median lot size to force, because if you look at these things statistically, you can develop a lot with an average lot size of such and such, but it consists of lots on two ends, and basically you can balance out like 2 5-acre lots will take care of a lot of small lots. So we need a couple, and then the median lot size prevents you from doing small lot sizes, no in the middle, and then big lot size. Median has to be here. So what we want to do is make sure the distribution of lots falls into what we conceive of as an acceptable compromise situation. And we can develop that by saying the average lot size needs to be this, the mean lot size, the median lot size, and the mean need to be the same, and an absolute minimum lot size. And that'll take care of the statistics of the situation.
I'm in favor of, you finished?
Yes,
Okay, sorry. I would disagree
sorry, I'm
whatsoever.
rattling off this
Yeah,
stuff,
that's
so
okay.
my mind is going like,
I don't-
how could I game the system here? That's the way I'm thinking.
I don't disagree with the minimum lot size, but I go back to fundamentally saying, other than the minimum lot size, let the developer spread out his subdivision like he wants. And if you want just my experience, a patio home lot typically is rarely below about 45 or 50 feet wide by 110 feet deep, give you a tiny yard in the back. You multiply that out, that's a little up, right around 5,000 square feet on a minimum lot size. 50 by 120 is what? Yeah. I have no problem. I mean, if that's where it would go. To contemplate anything smaller than that, ridiculous.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Just trying to bring it back to square footage to say, this would be if you want to do single family patio home development like we're done lives on, is that a duplex or a town?
It's a town.
It's a town,
I guess.
okay. Well, a patio home would traditionally be, somewhere in the 50, 55, 40, 50.
50 by 120 would be 6,000, which is what you were recommending as the average earlier.
But
This would be the minimum, this would be the average.
Minimum.
Yeah,
I was
Average.
looking at it. I was just poking at it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Everyone was wanting bigger than
I
that.
just
I know, but
trying to give
people
a
who
quick
come
number,
to
yeah.
those
That's all I'm
meetings, the people who come to those meetings are the people that oppose the situation. And the more loud they are, the
There
more
there
they're
was a
opposed.
number of developers that were in that meeting.
But they didn't say they wanted small lot size or large lots. The people that said they wanted small lots were all standing up and griping. And the problem with the way we're doing surveys, and I've seen this in many surveys we do in this town, including the deer survey, which I thought was one of these, do you still beat your wife surveys? Either way, you can't win. The point is that we have to be aware that what we heard was the basic 10% over here. We didn't hear anything from the 90%. And my guess is that if really didn't hear from the 90%, most of them would have said, and then we say, how would you like to have your streets fixed? And they all would have said, and there was a post today on next door, saying the streets are in terrible shape in Salado, and they are. And we're going to have a $5 million bond issue or something to pay for those streets. I'd rather get that $5 million from these people out here. But on the other side of the coin, so while I was happy to hear from these people, as far as I'm concerned, that's at best 10% of the opinion of the town. And it does not necessarily, not maybe it does not necessarily represent the other 90%. And my point is, if Salado is to survive, we must induce growth that is in the village limits. So my point is, how do we do that? Where's the compromise that'll do that and not anger, everybody?
I think your numbers are flipped. I think it's probably 90% of Salado that wants them to be larger. And when I'm saying larger, I'm not talking an acre or bigger. 10% probably would want smaller lots.
I think that's true, but
You got your numbers inverted, I think, as far as the opinion of the folks who live in Salado. And so when you said a minimum of 0.18 or whatever your number was, that's about what we're saying, that was your average. That's about what we're saying is the absolute minimum.
Yeah, I think I wanted 0.15, but that's.
That's what I'm saying, it's 6,000 something square feet.
Let me offer this to all of us. You get on social media, and
I don't get on social media with this stuff.
no, but if you look on social media, you'll see the committee is disparaged. We've been disparaged on social media from the time that we formed. We're called names. We're called flim flam artists. We're accused of being deceptive and trying to gather public input.
Yeah.
So the whole point of that is, ultimately, we're going to have to make the decision based on our own judgment, our own experience, and our own discussions here. That's not to say you ignore any input you get from friends, family, the public input session, social media, anything else. It's just good to gather as much information as you can. But remember, when you're gathering from a specific source, whether it's public input, there's just the people that are standing up and are angry enough to come to a meeting, or just curious enough to come to a meeting and not say anything. Or if you're gathering input from Facebook or Nextdoor or just talking to the people that you know, which is a closed circle, a small group of people, as opposed to the whole of the village. Remember, you're getting skewed data. And it might be skewed one side, it might be skewed another. Take it all into consideration, but remember, you're not getting a true sample size no matter what.
And at the end of the day, you all have been tasked with making a recommendation.
At the end of the day, it's going to be up to us to make the recommendation. So
Here's where I'm coming from, and I agree with you. I totally agree. My thinking is, we can belabor this for more months. We need to come to a decision, whatever that looks like. I agree with your philosophy, as opposed to limiting the developers as far as breaking me down by percentages. I love the idea of having an average lot size target with an absolute minimum, and that number, whatever that number needs to be. 5,000, 6,000, whatever, that 45, I don't care. We need to come to a decision what that looks like, and then the average, we need to come to a decision on that. As far as suggestions for P&Z, they're going to be working on this for months. And we're going to be months down the road, maybe a year, and we've still got no ordinances in place for subdivisions. And so my gut says we need to finish our work, get it passed on to P&Z, and then let them do what they're going to do. I love all the extra suggestions. That's fine, but that's not us. That's their suggestion. We're looking at minimum lot size. And so
So let's offer some alternatives. I'll start.
well, hold on a second. Before we start doing that, there's Melanie has been very quiet tonight, and I want to hear what your take on all this is.
Please.
You have to go sell them.
So I just want to make sure that all of us throwing all these ideas around, we're not just talking over here.
Oh, you're not. Believe me, I will speak up.
We're all
It's
ears.
needed. I like that concept because I don't want to take the flexibility away from the developer. Because when we do that, then that is a hindrance to them. But we still need to honor what Salado is and what Salado is about. And so I like the idea of the average. I think we need to be careful based upon the number of acres that are in planned development, that would be a little bit difficult. 6,000 square feet, I think, would be the minimum in my book. That's 50 by 120, that's adequate, but it's still small. But there are small lots in Salado, and we need to honor that, and I think that's what makes Salado beautiful in and of itself. I'm leaning towards an average, maybe around 0.25, 0.3, somewhere around there, but the minimum, 6,000 square feet is, I think, 0.137.
Can somebody, if you know, and I'm looking at you,
Right?
give us the definition between the difference in the definition for an average, so that we're all on the same page.
Median is defined as the most likely lot size. Like, for instance, you can have an average of 0.2 acres, and the most likely lot size would be 0.1, very easily. By adding a few large lots and a lot of small lots, you can get an average of 0.2, but you don't have the median. This is what I was saying. You have a huge number of small lots, no lots in the middle, and 2 or 3 or 4 big lots, and voila, your average is a certain amount. So you have to say, here's the minimum. The minimum should be close to the average, so they can't fudge down, all right? That prevents fudging down. And then the median prevents them from building a lot in a certain area, nothing in the middle, and a few big ones over here. So what that does is it sets up a standard bell curve. And that's what we want. We want most of the lots to be in the range of the average. Okay, does that make sense? So if we say 0.2 is got to be the average, then most of the lots should be around 9,000 square feet. And that's what we want. We don't want a lot of lots at 5,000 square feet and a couple or 3 lots at 100,000 square feet. Does that make sense?
No.
So.
No, it makes sense what you're saying.
It does make sense what
Yes.
you're saying.
Yeah.
It makes sense what you're saying.
It doesn't make sense, Frank, excuse me.
Whichever one of us got on, yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me because think about it, from an economic perspective, the developer's gonna come in and say, I'm gonna skew this so bad, I'm gonna make these big lots over here that are 2, 3, 4 acres. He paid, I don't know what he's paid, 20,000, 40,000 an acre,
It could be
60,000.
the ones with the cliffs and you could have
And then-
a small buildable area and a huge nothing.
And then you think that those 6-acre lots are gonna sell for $1 million, put $1 million house on it, and you're gonna have patio homes across the street. From a marketing standpoint, that's not
I
right.
understand. All I'm doing is setting up the parameter and say, okay, the mean and the median have to be close to each other. And
I understand.
yeah, it's just a built-in safeguard to prevent that from happening.
I think your example by which you illustrated the difference was so extreme that from a practical standpoint, it didn't make sense. But the principle that you laid out, that the average should be close to the median, is exactly what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's exactly what you're trying to do. All I want to do is
But the example used was so far out of whack with what really happened.
Not gonna happen.
It was just to illustrate what the difference is, how the difference.
But then it narrows down once you do that. If you have your minimum lot size, it takes care of it.
well,
So,
I could build you a subdivision very easily that has our average, and it's almost all minimum lot size.
You could lay one out on paper.
You wanna go put your money in that
No,
and do that, then you go right ahead and do that. And I'll sit here and clap all day long and wish you well.
All I want to do is say something like the mean and the median have to be close to each
I
other.
heard Melanie say 6,000 minimum. I'd be good with that. I'd be good with that.
And it's 0.137, as she said.
I'd be good with that. And then I think the average, if we went with that tack, probably ought to be about 12,000 square feet, which is 0.27. a little above a quarter, a little less than a third, what you said earlier.
That's the average total lot size.
Average total lot size is really low.
Average total lot size with a minimum no less than 6.
Right. That's, I'm just throwing some numbers out there.
We're talking strictly excluding road, we're talking specifically lot size.
You're talking lots, you're talking
Yes.
buildable lots.
Yeah, just the lot size.
Yes.
Because the optics, when you look at that from
That would
from
allow you
knowledge
for about a third.
you just did what?
That would allow you for about a third of an acre is your actual minimum when you're looking at gross, right?
Yeah.
That'd be about, you'd lose about 6/10, or 6/100, whatever it is, per
Yeah,
lot.
14,000 is a third of an acre on a lot.
With, yes,
Strictly the lot, no roads, no.
right, yeah, well, yeah, a little lower, but
But
yeah.
that means if you've got 6,000 square feet lots, then that means you're gonna have to have some half-acre lots to
That's right.
justify.
You gotta force it up.
And so,
Because when you start getting over half-acre lot, you start getting into the $1 million range pretty quick. Give or take a couple of $100,000.
so
You might just put it-
that accomplishes what I think everyone
And I agree.
wants, but it's a more, it gives the.
It gives more flexibility to developers, but yet it still holds that. It still holds what I was trying to accomplish with the percentages. It still holds that. It gets there a different way.
Yeah.
And without binding the developers to a particular percentage. I like it.
And I still think we need to put what Jay said in there, we support green space.
Strongly.
Strongly
green
support green
space.
space, that can't be bought.
So is there a way to incentivize green space development in these lot size recommendations?
Well, I think the P and Z's do know.
I think they'll go through the department, but you also, look at the credit concept. The credit concept is not a bad idea. You know, figure out some way that you can build a credit system in to get them the incentive to move in that direction. And that can be built in through that parkland dedication ordinance pretty easily. The interesting thing, I thought you might find it, the patio home in our zoning ordinance for inside the city right now, the minimum lot area required, of course, it's all regulated now by the half-acre septic, but in our zoning ordinance, 4,500 square feet. So we're actually recommending something that is above our minimum, which I think says a lot, but not that far above, to be honest.
That's one third.
Yeah.
I agree with 6,000. I would offer something like 9,000 for the average. And that's where I go. And 9,000 is 0.2 approximately.
No, it's a little big nutty.
That's 0.2.
Whatever 0.2 is, you know.
It's 43,560. Is what?
0.2.
That's 0.2.
Which is the lot size that triggered the formation of this committee.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go there.
That's awful, that's too small,
It's too
it's awful small.
0.25.
Where did I say?
You said a third originally.
That makes sense. Because the original subdivision came in at 2,
Which would be about
2.5.
14,000? 14,500?
Keep 0.25.
43,560 divided by 4, 14,500?
Oh, wait, a third is 14.5.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, 14.5, yes.
See, an average of a third, I think is, what I'm trying to do is incentivize the developers effectively. And by putting in these other recommendations to P and Z and the Board of Aldermen that they consider setbacks and all these other things, we should be able to control the look of the subdivision to some extent. But when you say, you know,
Not in the ETJ. Bottom line, we're creating an ordinance for the ETJ as well as in the village. You can't tell them how to build their houses in the ETJ. All you can do is give them the minimum lot size
that's true.
And the green space.
and the green space.
But the point I'm making is that what we're trying to do is pay for our sewer system and pay for our streets. And that means they come in the village. And I agree with you, anything.
If they connect to sewer, they come in.
If they connect to the sewer.
If not, they don't have to come in.
But we want them in the village.
You do, but you're a general law city, and the only way they come in is voluntarily. So the reality of it is, you can't hold a gun to their head through regulation.
But you
to
could
force
pay
them.
them to come in, and you can make it really delicious for them to come in. That's my point. I don't want to, I don't disagree necessarily with what you guys are coming to here. I just say, my point of view is, as a good friend of mine said, every square inch of Salado should be taxed at the highest possible rate.
I think the way you encourage people to come in, this is a sidebar issue, the way you.
Come on, hold them on.
Yeah, that's, I don't do anything.
Let me just say this, I think the way you encourage people to come in is you establish a good reputation, and a reputation where they trust you and they think you're reasonable in your regulatory process. And I think that's how it works.
I defer to your extremely more judgment than I got on that.
I appreciate everything you're saying, it needs to be heard, so please don't take issue with me, just,
Oh, no.
or on that, I hope you won't, that needs to be heard.
Well, this is the given, back and forth, give and take.
We need to have an open discussion.
No, I agree, I agree.
No problem.
I think 6,000 was for sure.
We range from an absolute minimum of 6,000 to an average of 12,000 to 9,500, 14,500. And my personal input on that is, I would tend to want to see a slightly larger average. I like the 14.5. I really don't like the smaller averages, because I think that,
It changes the dynamic of Salado.
well, it has the potential. And that's in my own mind. I need to think about this. I'm not prepared to defend that number to death at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, that you want to see if we stay there. But we don't.
No, you have to see it.
Yeah, bring one thing up, just as a discussion on smaller lots in there. The traditional setbacks that we have to recognize aren't going to work on a 55-foot wide lot. And they're going to have to be adjusted. You can't have, 15-foot side yard setback? Five in the city? That's 10, so you can do it. I mean,
That's what you got over here.
55, so 55 by 110, 6,000 feet, you can easily do it on 50 foot, 45 foot. That works.
I'm good, I'm just gonna say, I'm good, 6,000 minimum, I'm good, anywhere from that 12 to 14.5, I'm good with that. But I am telling you, this is not meant as leverage. I've done after tonight. I've got to keep moving on, so, that's my input.
Okay.
And, anything else that you guys, as far as recommendations for other things to consider, that's good. But
14.5 comes out to point.
third.
And your recommendation, Frank, was kind of, I thought that a lot. Did you have 5%
Green space.
green space mandatory in?
So
That's what your minimum.
Would you say that again? I missed that part.
What's that?
What you just said.
He was asking when I sent that out to y'all about some things to chew on, I put 5% green space. Minimum.
Is that a gross acreage or development?
Gross acreage.
That's gross acreage. So you had floodplain in there, you can have that, but then they have to dedicate that to part of the city. It would be usable.
I almost lean on that being more parkland dedication issue.
I
almost lean on that being more of a parkland dedication issue.
I agree. Oh, no, I know it is. That's it, but as far as the recommendations by Jay, I mean,
Would you recommend it?
I was just gonna ask you, more recent times, have subdivision trends been moving up on a percentage of gross acreage parkland development?
In this city?
No, in this locale.
Generally locale, I think in the area, yes. In this city, it's been cash, and it's been limited. It's not
Because it was
enforced.
cheaper to do than give land.
In your past, What was the percentage typically that required?
Anywhere from 5 to 10%.
So that's not overly burdensome for the
No.
5% number.
5% is not much at all at the end of the day.
Half acre, a third of an acre lot is still going to generate an expensive house.
Yeah.
Relative, that's not going to be a 200. It's going to be 300 and up minimum. I mean,
Well-
it's just going to be.
And that's an average, I think, even with, and again, I've got, like you, I've got them all these numbers, but if we've got a third of an acre average, that does give us room to have some that are down at the minimum.
Yeah.
Well, I think,
We're gonna wind up with subdivisions, developments that come out of this that, are meeting what we want as a community, which is a mix of lot
I think it
sizes.
provides
mix
enough
of
for
house styles.
side-loaded garages for recommendation and things like that. P and Z.
Third is a lot bigger than we realize.
I know it's
It
big.
is.
Yeah,
It's a
so,
big lot.
but we can
Yes, it
still have
is.
a developer come in and have a development agreement that will throw this out the window.
It could, yeah.
Yeah, and I was gonna say
we got no
that.
control of that though.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is, this is not set in concrete and will never change. We're gonna have a P and Z change it, we're gonna
It's a-
have
it's a-
Alderman change it.
And it's
we're
a
gonna have
standard, it's a
everybody change it.
standard that's always subject to change through agreement, so.
So we can do our best, and then next week, the developer will come in with and
Ask
create
for
a
a variance
development